Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of Wednesday, September 17th, 2014. Can I have the roll call, please?
Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Jennifer Hayes. J.P. Kuzinski.
Here.
Joe McCoy.
Here.
Dan Riss.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here.
Joy Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of
So
September
moved.
3rd.
Second.
Motion and a second for the approval of minutes of September 3rd. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? I'll be an abstention, please. And I guess that covers it. Public speak time. If there's anyone here from the public who would like to address the council for something other than what's covered in the public hearings tonight, please come to the podium and state your name and address. I'm not seeing anyone. We have no communications from elected officials, correspondence. Mayor communications. Mayor Cadger.
Good evening. I just had a couple of updates that I thought the councilors might be interested in. First of all, Valerie, our auditor, has submitted our Schedule A to the Department of Revenue and free cash, and I believe that we're the first community to submit Schedule A, so it's very commendable. And second of all, you'll notice before you that hopefully you'll be sending it to Finance Subcommittee is the fire contract. So that will conclude all the contracts. So we are now current. So I'll look forward to work with the Finance Subcommittee on it. And we've had a very different way of doing contracts this time around. So as you know, we were at one time 3 years out of contract with the fire, 2 years out of contract with the police, and as of right now, we have agreed on all our contracts. And we've negotiated them all, myself, Personnel Director, our Finance Director, and if this fire contract, the chief, or whatever other contract it would be, the supervisors. So we've got the 2 DPW contracts before you and the fire, which brings us up to par. So I'm really excited about that.
Are there any questions for the mayor while she's up here? Do we have a preliminary free cash number yet? Is that?
Actually, that's something that we don't like to do, is give preliminary numbers, because it's actually much more exciting when it comes in and you don't know than if you're expecting, and so, and and Val is just so detailed, and I couldn't be happier.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So moving on to standing committees, rules and government relations, Councilor Riss.
Although, Mr. President, I have no report this evening, I wanted to apologize to the council. Some of you may have seen my email to the President this evening. Last meeting, as the chair of the council, I allowed public speak time, although properly reopened by the council. I allowed an issue at the end of the meeting to be debated and discussed between the councilors and the person involved. The mayor got involved. That was a violation of our Rule 5F, and I did so because this constituent of mine, and was one of mine, and I had a very large interest in the issue. However, we need to remember that at public speak time, we should only allow the persons to speak. We cannot enter into a discussion or debate, because it is a violation of open meeting laws to put an issue before the council that is not on the agenda, or it could be. And I think we need to maintain that, because then it becomes a free-for-all with all of the people that wish to speak to us. We are different than at a committee, and I apologize for that. I should have known better and simply referred it to the Board of Public Works, which I did at the end. I just want to remind us that we need to maintain that because of the possibility of violating open meeting laws by going into detail on an issue that's not even on our agenda. Saying that, of course, if an issue is presented to us and it's informational, we could also decide as individual councilors to refer it to the council for an agenda item to be reviewed and sent to committee, whatever we would like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hagan.
Just a comment. I appreciate what Councilor Rist is saying, but under 5F, I don't necessarily think you owe the council an apology, because it does say you can have discussion. It says you should be limited. I think this was a particular case. I think if anyone knows me, I'm a big fan of transparency and the conflict of interests and open meeting law, so I'd be the last one if I thought there was a problem. But to me, what I saw was a senior citizen who came here with the idea of redressing his government. And I think the council was using common sense in at least letting him go on a little bit. Maybe the debate went a little longer than we should have, but I didn't think it was an egregious event. I thought it was something that this resident, and it was an issue that once you heard it, I didn't comment myself because I wasn't familiar with it, but once you heard what it wasn't anything that was ever going to be taken up by the council. It was something that really was in the bailiwick of the mayor and/or the Board of Public Works, and that's what the individual was told at the end. And I just, I don't want to discourage people from coming down, and again, I agree most of the time we shouldn't comment, but I mean, I think there is times when a citizen at least should expect a little bit of interaction with the council. So it's just again, I appreciate what Councilor is saying, but I really don't think you have to apologize to you.
I think certainly the open meeting laws are an issue, and I think it is about transparency, and I completely agree what you're saying, but on the flip side, there could be a citizen who is saying, that issue is important to me, why did I have a chance to talk about it? And so that, I think, is where the whole idea came from, is to be very vigilant that issues are, if it's going to be discussed in a debate format, that everyone is aware of it so they can participate if they want. Councilor Riss, did you?
I would only say, of course, the president and the chair of the meeting has discretion. And I think if there's information being presented, of course, there could be interaction. But if the issue is debated, the mayor gets involved, and the mayor's defending, as it was in this case, the situation, then we're opening it up to an agenda item which other neighbors, the Department of Public Works could have. I've thought long and hard on it, and I think I went overboard with my discretion. I don't disagree with transparency. I think we need to be careful. That's all I'm saying. We need to be careful, and it's very hard because you want to approach citizens with the ability to speak to us, and they want to ask a question, they want to know why we can't answer it, and that's hard, so.
And the good thing is, I feel absolutely 100% confident that every single one of these counselors here are completely accessible and want to be accessible, so that is terrific. So we'll move on to other committees. Finance, Councilor Hagan.
We're changing up our subcommittee a little next week, and the subcommittee is going to meet on Monday evening. A couple of us had conflicts on Wednesday, so we're going to meet Monday evening at 6 p.m., which is the 22nd, and I'm not sure yet what room. I'll have to check with the clerk on what room. So
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Will you be longer than an hour?
I doubt it, but
Okay, because there's a meeting at 7.
okay. Yeah, we'll again, I can talk to you, and you'll post it.
Yeah.
Also, we have one item on the public hearing tonight, a supplemental appropriation with the fire department. And I also, at this time, I'd like to set a couple of public hearings. I'd like to set a public hearing on the matter on the agenda, supplemental appropriation of $13,418 for the DPW employees contract. And in the form of a motion, I'd like to set a public hearing for the October 1st meeting on that.
Second. Okay, motion a second to set a public hearing for the $13,418.45 for October 1st, 6:15 p.m. in these chambers. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And also a supplemental appropriation of $256,000. I'd like to set a public hearing for CPA Historic Preservation Account for the Old Town Hall improvements. I'd like to set a public hearing on that matter also for October 1st.
Second. Okay, motion a second for an additional public hearing of the $256,000 for the CPA appropriation for the front lobby restrooms at Old Town Hall. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And that's it for finance now. I know there's one item of new business which I'll address at that time.
Okay. Public Safety, Councilor Wendy, would you be willing to take that in Councilor Hayes' absence?
We're still working with the Willow Circle and Autumn Drive acceptance. Councilor Hayes sent us an email, just an update saying that she was possibly going to be late for tonight's meeting, and that she was working on the draft for the street acceptance, and as soon as she gets that draft up and going, she'll present it to the subcommittee for any additions, deletions, or tweaking. Then once we get it through our subcommittee meeting, then we will then offer it to all of the city departments that would be involved, planning, DPW, and so forth. And once we get their feedback, and of course the other counselors that are interested in it, once we get the feedback from the departments that it's going to mostly affect, then we'll come to the full city council into ordinance for a revamping of the whole streets acceptance protocol.
Okay. That concludes then.
It does, thank you.
Okay. And I think you're on again, appointments.
Yeah, I am. We have one appointment that I'm going to make now down to subcommittee, if you don't mind,
No.
Mr. President.
Yep.
So I move that the appointment for James Valencourt for Planning Board Associate Member be moved to the Appointment Subcommittee for review.
Second.
Okay, a motion, a second to move the name of James Valencourt to the appointments for a Planning Board Associate Member appointment. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Opposed?
you.
Abstained? Motion passes.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be at 5:45 for this appointment on October 1st in downstairs,
Conference room B.
conference room B.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance, Councilor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. We actually have a few things on our agenda tonight. So we did meet on September 10th. We reviewed all of the items that we had on our agenda. The first thing I'd like to take care of is we have an application for a taxi business license and application for 5 taxi vehicle licenses. And we met with Scott Bellamore, the proprietor, asked questions, went through the proposal, and found that it was appropriate to move forward. So at this time, I'd like to move that we accept the application for taxi business license. And should I do the vehicle separately?
It's up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the 5 vehicles as well.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion, a second, for the approval of the taxi license as well as the 5 vehicles. Is that worded correctly?
Yep. And just a little further information. I don't know if I got a second on that yet.
I was gonna say.
I did, I second.
Okay,
Okay.
beautiful. It's going to be at 1 Lovefield Street, which is the old tractor building, and across from 1 Ferry Street. So that's where the business is going to be.
Okay. So a motion, a second. Any additional discussion on the taxi cab? Councilor Rist.
You had mentioned you were going to deal with the other 10 vehicles. I was wondering what your thinking is on that.
I think those vehicles are going to be forthcoming. So
So we'll have to vote on those separately.
we'll vote on those separately.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any additional comments or discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
Okay, and the next thing on our agenda is the request for us to endorse the city's housing production plan. And we have some experts in the room that I think could shed a little light. I know that we're about 5 minutes away from our, I don't know if you want me to start this now, or we can...
Do you need more than 5 minutes, Council?
It will depend on whether you need more than that. We certainly don't, but if the council feels like that they want to speak to this item longer than 5 minutes, we're willing to wait till after the public hearing.
There may be some questions. I know I was at the meeting, but I know some of the other councilors weren't, so if you don't mind.
We can pick
Yeah,
that up.
so
I have
we'll
other
pick it
stuff.
up. Yeah, exactly.
I do
So
have
why
other
don't you
stuff,
continue?
So one of the things that we also discussed at our meeting was an agenda item that we've had on here since last November. We didn't want to get to the year mark, and so after discussion with the planner and after some research by our committee, we decided that the request to adopt Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2002 was something that at this point we don't have any properties that necessarily would be affected by this specific thing, which would basically allow us to forgive property taxes in lieu of development of that property. The type of property that it would be really appropriate for would be a property like 1 Ferry Street. But as of now, 1 Ferry Street is not 3 years out in back taxes, so it would not apply to that specific property. So we felt that if we allowed this to be released from our agenda without prejudice, then at some point, if a property did meet those criteria, then we could bring it back, and if we felt that it would behoove us to have that as a tool. So I guess at this time, unless anybody has any questions.
Counselor Rist?
I would just ask that the planner keep us aware that this might be necessary, because I think it's a good idea, but hearing what you've said, that there's no land really or no property that would accommodate this article, we should drop it. But I don't want it to be something we forgot.
Right, and I was going to mention that in an email I sent to Councilor Cobb, who brought this forward. I thanked him for bringing this to our attention, because I think that at some point in the future, this could be a really useful tool for us if we want to, look at, allowing tax abatement for the development of a property. But at this time, I'd like to move to remove this agenda item, the request to adopt Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2002 without prejudice.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to remove from the ordinance agenda the request to adopt Chapter 2 of Acts of 2002. Any additional comments or questions on this? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
And one last thing before we go to public hearing, we have a tentative joint public hearing with the planning board for October 14th. I just want to make sure, the reason I say tentative is because I haven't confirmed with my other chair people on my committee. So I just want to make sure that they're going to be able to attend that. But tentatively, October 14th would be a joint planning board, city council public hearing on the planning board's request to amend section 8.5 accessory apartments.
Okay, terrific. Thank
That
you very
concludes.
much. Could I have a motion to open public hearings?
So moved.
Is there a motion, a second, please? A motion, a second to open public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. Counselor Hagan.
Our only public hearing tonight is a supplemental appropriation request, and I'll do a second reading on that matter. It's dated August 25th, 2014. The request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $40,000. It would be appropriated from the stabilization fund, and that amount and appropriated to the fire department truck fund FY 2015. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds to replace a 1999 1/2-ton 3-door extended cab with a 1/2-ton quad cab truck for the fire department. We took this up at the subcommittee meeting, and it did pass 3-0. I think Chief Motter's here. If we could call Chief Motter first, and he can probably better explain his need for this vehicle.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors. The request you have before you, as Councilor Hagan said, is to replace a 1999 Chevy pickup. Recently, both the ABS and brake warning lights came on in this vehicle. It went down to motor repair, and it was determined that it was a control module for the anti-lock brake system. While he was troubleshooting that, the actual hydraulics of the brake that it connected to was severely corroded. The brake lines were severely corroded. The wheel cylinders which apply the rear brakes were corroded. So by the time he priced out the repair of just that issue was over $2,000. While he was going through, he found that the frame on the passenger seat was broken, which would require replacing the seat, and he found extensive rust under the vehicle. And this vehicle's already had body work done 3 times on it. So it's his recommendation not to put any more money into this vehicle. It's worth maybe $3,000, $3,500 as a book value. Its actual worth is far less than that. And he also recommended that it be traded in because a surplus auction would provide very little return. And he was against reassigning it to another city department because then somebody else is just stuck throwing good money at bad. The vehicle to replace it is a 1/2-ton pickup. We're using the Plymouth County Commissioners Cooperative Purchasing bid. I compared their pricing with some local Chevrolet dealers, and they couldn't even come close to touching it based on volume. This is for a pickup truck with a full light package, lettering, and radios. We're hoping that more than not, it's going to come in under the 40,000, but we were still waiting for radio installation charges. One of the reasons we went from the little back seat to a full four-door cab was a neighboring department went with this type of vehicle for the purpose of when you get called mutual aid for just manpower, which happens on occasion. Instead of rolling a $500,000 engine down the road that's pretty pricey per hour to operate to just sit there and idle, we can put 4 firefighters in this pickup and send them out of town. The reason this request is not in normal capital, after conversations with the mayor, right now the only four-wheel drive vehicle in our fleet, because the 1999 pickup is off the road, is a 1999 Ford Expedition with about 120,000 miles that was given to us by the town of Russell about 6 years ago. That vehicle now also needs several $1,000s of repairs. I was told it will not pass its safety inspection this year, so come February 1st, that vehicle will be parked. We're looking at 8 to 10 weeks turnaround from the time we order this truck to the time we get it in. So there's a potential that we'd be left without a single four-wheel drive vehicle in the fire department. And with the winters that we've been having, that's not a risk that I would feel comfortable taking. And I'm open to any questions if the councilors have any.
Yeah, question, Councilor Hagan?
No, no.
Oh, I thought that's what. Any additional questions? Okay. I guess not. Thank you. Mayor Cadger, do you have any comments? Okay.
Thank you, Chief. The other thing that came up in one of the last finance subcommittee meeting was, as you know, we're using stabilization because the chief feels that he can't wait till free cash is certified. That would we be putting the funds back into stabilization? It is always our intention and will always be my goal to put as much into stabilization as we possibly can.
Okay. Any additional comments, questions, Mayor? Okay, Councilor Hagan. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to address the council concerning the appropriation for the pickup truck? That being said, no, Councilor Hagan.
My only other comment was going to be on the stabilization fund, but the mayor covered that. Hearing none, I'll make the following motion, that the full council approve the supplemental appropriation in the amount of $40,000 to be appropriated from the stabilization fund and appropriated to the fire department truck fund for the funds to replace the 99 1/2-ton 3-door extended cab with a 1/2-ton quad cab truck for the fire department.
Second. A motion and a second for the supplemental appropriation of $40,000 from stabilization to the fire department truck fund. Additional comments or questions? Councilor Rist?
I wanted to make comment on the stabilization fund issue. I think the mayor was appropriate in using it for a public safety, almost urgent emergency to get this vehicle here before winter. It is a necessary vehicle for public safety, and I think it's an appropriate use of our stabilization fund. If we have no other source of funding, even if free cash is not available, I have no objection to that usage. And I know we've been successful in putting free cash back in every year, but when we have to do it, we have to do it. There are certain times when that's why that's there to use. So I'm very happy that we're not hesitating to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Additional comments, questions? Okay, Councilor Hagan. Oh,
I already made a
yeah, okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion passes.
Move that the public hearings be closed.
Second.
We have motion and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, motion passes. We were left off with property council.
No, housing ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Unfinished business.
Yes,
on the
okay,
Forget
ordinance.
So we do have a request for the council to endorse the city's housing production plan. And we did review it, we did meet with the planner and discussed it. And I guess I would defer if you guys would like to say a little something.
Hello, I'm here with Jackie Bruce Pereira, who is representing the Housing Partnership. The Planning Department and the Housing Partnership worked together with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission over the past year to update the housing production plan. The last housing production plan was completed in 2006. So we have updated this plan. This plan serves a couple of purposes. One, it provides us with a good assessment of our housing needs. It gives us some good demographic data, housing trends data, and then also helps us to develop strategies to how to move forward with providing housing for all housing types, specifically for affordable housing. This plan is an affordable housing plan. What is required in this plan is mandated by the Department of Housing and Community Development. In order to have this plan accepted by DHCD, we needed endorsement not only from the Housing Partnership, but also the Planning Board, who reviewed and endorsed the plan in July. In August. The Housing Partnership endorsed it in July. We held a public meeting in June that some of you did attend. We had members of the Planning Board also attend the meeting, and we presented about an hour and a half long presentation on the details of the plan and all of the strategies and recommendations. So what we're asking for you tonight is to certify this plan, or to endorse this plan, so that we can send it to DHCD for approval. Couple of notes for this plan in terms of not only does it provide us with the assessment, but it also can be used if we meet the housing goals that's set forth in terms of the number of affordable housing units that need to be developed annually, which is set at 38 units a year, which is a lot, and probably hard to reach, except we've reached it this past year, almost just because of a fluke and a lot of work that was done by the Housing Partnership to move those projects forward. If we reach that goal annually, we can get the plan certified by DHCD and be able to use it to deny 40B projects. We cannot get it certified unless we hit the 38 units annually. That number is set by a formula that is developed by DHCD. It's not a number that the Housing Partnership came up with on their own. There's a formula that is set by DHCD to reach that number. So that gives you sort of the broad picture of the plan and its use. I'm going to turn it to Jackie to see if she has any other anything else she wants to add, and then we're open for any questions. You have a copy of the plan, and we gave you a copy of the presentation that was given in June that is more of a summary of the data.
I think the only thing that I would add that Jess didn't mention is that having an approved housing production plan means that the city could also have preference for certain state grants as well. So just having the plan in place gives you some preferential treatment for certain different types of grants. I don't really feel like I have too much more to add. It's all in the plan. I think it's a great plan. We've worked on it really hard. We learned a lot about changing demographics in the city and what needs are and so forth. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
Councilor Rist?
I'm excited a little bit about the potential for the 40B, what you say is relief. I want to have a little more explanation, perhaps for the residents who don't know what 40B means. I'm going to say this, and please correct me if I'm wrong. 40B meaning a development which can go through, because of our lack of affordable housing, can go through the process, planning and zone, because without much oversight for that development, because it is a 40B development, we don't have as much input into its plans. Is that a correct statement? And therefore, if we are able to get this kind of a plan in place, we're able to prevent those kinds of things from happening and maintain more oversight over development?
It doesn't necessarily prevent it. It gives the ability of the ZBA to deny the development if it meets what has been stated in this plan. As long as it's consistent with the housing needs that has been set forth in this plan, it gives the ZBA the ability to deny the project.
Deny the project's 40B application?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then it could be appealed, and it could go to the state, and it could still happen.
Last question. Do we need to have 38 units a year to be in that position?
Yes,
Is that
we
what
do.
you're saying?
Yes, we do. And then,
Wow.
Yep, 38 units. And in this year, we have 50 units being built at 15 Cottage Street, and we have 38 units being built at Parsons Village. So we have a total of 88 units being currently built right now.
Can we put some of them in the next year?
You cannot. So it's a really hard goal, but I think, if One Ferry Street ever is redeveloped, and there's more than 38 units that's part of that project, that could be an opportunity to allow us to certify the plan. We get the certification for 1 year. So after that 1 year, that certification is gone unless in the next year you build another 38 units. We're about 300 units short of reaching our 10% goal
I was
in
going
the
to ask
city.
you about 10%. Once we
We're at
reach that,
We're at 6% right now. However, it's continually a moving target. The more market rate units that are being built, the farther away that percentage goes. You have to keep it on a consistent path
I
that you're
get you.
continuing to build affordable units as market rate is increasing as well. And that's a challenge. It's really hard to build affordable housing. It's expensive. It's not easy. That's why a lot of developers don't do it.
So, if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. President, so the grant you might apply for would apply toward affordable housing construction?
I don't
Is that
know.
what
I mean, I
that's done?
haven't recently seen any grants that have as part of their questions, do you have a housing production plan? I'm sure they're out there and I'm sure I'll stumble upon them, but I don't know what they are specifically at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional comments?
Just a couple things that came out from committee. You know, I think when you say affordable housing, it can be a little bit of a panic button sometimes. And a lot of people are like, well, we have a lot of affordable housing in Easthampton. And one of the clarifications we had was it has to be deed restricted affordable housing for it to count towards our 10%. And then, one of the reasons why the committee approved this 3-0 was, the 40B relief, and that was huge on our radar. More state funds being available for grants if we endorse this. And this plan itself is progress towards our 10%. Which I think is important to recognize, that us passing this shows progress towards our 10%. So that counts in the state's eyes, I believe. And so we did vote 3-0 to endorse this.
Okay. Any additional questions for our guests here tonight? All right, Councilor Hagan.
Just a couple of quick questions. When's the last time, I know this year was a very good year because we had 2 big prizes, but when's the last time we did, to make it a realistic goal? I don't recall in my tenure, I'm sure a lot of the other councils, that we did 38.
Treehouse
So
is a
probably back
40B
when Treehouse-
project.
That when we had 38 units or whatever.
There was quite a few units, and
No,
it-
no, no.
and it was in different phases. So there were the rentals, and then there's the home ownership that's part of the Treehouse project. So there's almost 2 distinct 40B projects that happened there. Mountain View was also a 40B project. So I think what the trend that sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just say the trend that I'm seeing is I have local developers coming into my office that are interested in building affordable housing. They want to do like a 6-unit development and have 2 of them stay as affordable units. It's really a lot of hoops for them to jump through in order to make them affordable, not just in terms of the development, but you have to have a marketing plan for those units. You need to be able to income qualify possible tenants. There's a lot of steps that need to happen in order to ensure that they're meeting the requirements under the state guidelines of who can live in those units. And it's really daunting. And they go, no, I don't think so. So one of the things that we've been talking about on partnership meetings is, are there ways that the partnership can support some of those more local developers trying to do some of these smaller projects, because that's what we have. We have smaller infill projects. One ferry is there. It's the gorilla in the room, but there's only one ferry. We have a lot more smaller projects where we could help developers build units as part of those if we could provide them a level of support. So.
Did you get your questions? I don't.
No, I just had a follow-up if I could.
Yeah, sure.
I think what's important, and maybe I differ from the housing partnership a little, but I think what's important in my mind is that Easthampton is an affordable place for people to live. And I know we always emphasize the 10% deed restrictions, but while I found the demographic information very good, and I like that part of it, it's 82 pages, I've read it a couple times, I still don't have it all. But do we have a number of what housing stock in Easthampton is affordable, not deed restricted affordable, but affordable? Because I know, and I can just tell you one of the new projects, someone was telling me, they were asking me how they go about it, and when they looked into it, they actually, where they're currently renting is actually less expensive than the affordable,
Right.
deed restricted affordable
Right.
unit, and I was just wondering what, and it may be in there,
There is.
Jessica.
I'm going to go to the presentation because it's a little bit more succinct, but there was a chart in there that showed what percentage of, based on household income, it was 45% of our, based on household income, 45% of the population would meet the 80% or less.
Which is the opposite of the question, I think, that's being asked.
Oh, okay, well,
We know that there's need for at least 45% of people need to be able to access affordable housing. We don't, I don't think we do have a clear number on how much of our housing stock is actually affordable.
Don't you?
That's the question that you're
That's
asking.
what I'm asking you,
Right.
Jackie.
We did it-
And
yeah,
I
we
think
did
it's a
it-
very important question, because that's really what makes Easthampton affordable or not affordable.
Right.
Again, I understand the state law in the 40B and that the
There was
deed
a- there
restriction,
was a
but what
quick-
makes the town affordable is, do we have affordable housing?
there was a quick assessment that was done where there was some looking at real estate listings, looking on Craigslist, looking in the Gazette, to try to determine where our rents fall. And in average, they are fairly affordable in comparison to some of our neighbors. However, they are increasing, and it's getting more expensive to live in Easthampton because we are seeing this overflow from Northampton. People cannot afford to live in Northampton anymore, and they are coming to Easthampton. And as a result, our rents are starting to creep up a little bit to match what's happening to our neighbors. So I think that's something we really need to be conscious of. And maybe the real estate agents at the table have a different assessment, but but that's what our data was showing in the plan, is we are starting to creep up, and we need to be prepared for that.
And one of the things that adds to that is we've always traditionally had a pretty low vacancy rate in our rentals, and that will continue to push the market a little bit higher.
Councilman Hagan, I think what you're looking for is actually on pages 46 and 47. And on page 46 is where they have the what they found through Craigslist and the real estate firms. And on 47, I thought it was actually an interesting little chart, because they're talking about the 30% of your monthly income, and you'll see as you go over that a household, it's household 4, making $30,000. 30% of that would be $750, and that was kind of one of the average ranges for a rental in Easthampton. So it's, you know, again, looking at the income of what a family needs to make to afford a rental in Easthampton.
I will note, we did have one member of the public at the public meeting in June that was actively looking for a place to live and felt that these numbers were too low, and that the units that he was looking at were much higher than what we had assessed. So,
Councilor Ziegler, so are you saying that, given this thing, it's about 30%? Is that?
Well, that was
I mean, just for
going through the
again,
whole report.
just-
They're really
No, I know
focusing
you're-
on the
right, I know
30%.
you're helping me with the-
And anybody, again, if you're paying more than 30% of your monthly income, then you are
In need of
burdened. Right.
In need of. I know Councilor Winnie had a question. I have a couple more comments, but.
Couple comments, not really one question. The Habitat for Housing House, is that going to qualify as one of the, okay.
yes, they just went through their lottery last week, and they're in the process of doing family selection. So they're following the DHC guidelines to make sure that those units are going to be counted on the inventory.
Okay, good, thank you. Kind of in the conversation with Councilor Hagan, there's a lot of units in Easthampton that are under HAP and 7B, and a lot of them, the state has the numbers. I don't necessarily think that we have the numbers of how many units are being rented in apartments that are getting HAP subsidies and so forth. I know that at one time my apartment was under a HAP subsidy, and I always said that if they counted the HAP subsidies in Easthampton that were given out through HAP, we would probably be over our 10%. But because my property, and I don't choose to have my property on a deed restriction, I don't want my property under a deed restriction, and I don't think that a lot of people that own their own properties and are renting an apartment on their own property that they're living in necessarily want to go down the road of having a deed restriction on their property that they're living in. So I think that kind of plays into it, but we don't have a number unless you can get a number from the state as to how many HAP apartments they have.
Yeah, how many apartments are eligible to collect Section 8? Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
in Section 8.
That's traditionally been a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, and I don't think the state's willing to give that information to you. So I think it's a moving target. And a lot of the rental increases that I'm seeing as the homeless liaison in Northampton is a lot of people are losing their houses still to the economy, and even though they've lost their houses, they now have to have a place to live. So now they are all now moving into the apartments because they don't have any alternative. they've lost their homes to the mortgage crisis and for whatever reason, economical or whatever, or have given up their houses and put them on the market and are moving now into apartments. So that's also making the apartments less available, and it's also pushing up the rents on those, so.
I mean, I don't want to be misunderstood. It's not that I'm against this document. I mean, I
Right.
think that we need affordable, deed-restricted affordable housing. I'm not just saying that.
Right.
I do think we do have affordable housing in town. I mean, more so than most communities in Hampshire County. I won't say most, I don't want to go into,
Yeah, I'm not
So I'm just
disputing
pointing that out,
but-
that it's not, again,
Yeah.
there's apples and oranges
Right.
when we talk,
Yeah.
what is affordable housing?
There's two definitions.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Counselor Ziegler?
Yes, I was just curious, I mean, this year it sounds like we're very fortunate to have so many units being constructed, but with that number of 38, do we have a previous year when we hit the 38 mark? When we actually constructed 38?
Treehouse?
Treehouse, you just said.
Treehouse.
Oh, well, I just want to be clear though,
But
because it
that was
sounded
over
like,
time.
It's permitted over time, so.
right, so it wasn't
Yeah.
actually 38 within 1 year, is what I was kind of gathering from the
May
previous
have been
question.
1 year. No?
I'd have to
If it
go
was
back.
pretty close.
Clearly, it is going to be challenging to build 38 units after this year, when we have these two large projects. And because, as we know this anyway, but it came out in the Housing Production Plan research, is that we don't have a lot of developable land in Easthampton. So the chances of another big project like that, except for One Ferry, actually happening is pretty slim. But I think the state wants all communities to be making good faith efforts towards whatever that number is. I think that they know that most communities are not going to hit that number, but they want to see you they don't want you to just stop trying. So this is really, it's us saying, here are some strategies where we're going to work towards building more deed-restricted affordable housing, and they know that communities like this, it's really difficult to do that. So this is more of a plan that shows we're making a good faith effort towards doing it, and here's how we're going to do that, if that helps.
Additional comments, questions? I know certainly for me, it's an ambitious goal to reach the 38 projects. I doubt we will do it. But for me, what I think is up is just the availability of other grants by having adopted this program is why I think it's worthwhile to support. That was my thoughts. Any additional?
I can bring this up now, or if someone's going to make a motion, but going through it, again, the demographics I like a lot of the things. Where I'm having a little trouble, and it's 82 pages, is, and I don't know, maybe you can, maybe there's a way of addressing my concern, but what I don't, we're approving this, yet under your schedules of actions, while I again agree with a lot of them, probably most of the schedules of actions, some of these involve zone changes and issues that are going to come before the council. And how do you, in a sense, approve them and say you're for them, and then give them a fair hearing? In fact, we have right now in front of us it's in Councilor Derby's committee for the accessory apartments, and that's one of the goals in the schedule of action. So I guess my question is, how as a council do we say we support all the schedules of actions, and then a schedule of action comes up, and I mean, is it a foregone conclusion we can't change what's brought up here? And so I don't know if there's a way of approving, in my mind, of approving the plan and not the schedule of actions, or at least having some type of the motion of a caveat where we aren't, and I know it's a guideline and we wouldn't have to, but.
As I say, that was one of my concerns too, is, I mean, again, I can endorse the city having the plan, but as I went through the recommended actions, it's pages 59 through 69, and then as you said, the schedule, there are a number of things that are suggesting of donating of land and rezoning things that, when I'm going through it, it's like, well, I'm not really necessarily, I'd have to do more research to consider and have public hearings, whether or not you're in favor of these things, but again, I can certainly, the plan itself, as you say, the demographics, all the information, it's very informative, very well done, very well presented, so I can certainly endorse the city having this plan to, further these efforts to increase our numbers by the 300 and some units. But again, I'm with the same hesitation and reservations around specifically those pages on the recommendations and the schedule.
Okay, I'd like you guys to address that if you could. before, the question, do
Counselor to
you have something
All I was
different?
going to say, and I think you might say it, is this document is not binding the council to anything. This document, my hesitation would be the same if it were, because there are zoning recommendations, but they're guidelines. We're not bound, it's a plan, and we've had lots of plans with which I hope this does not find its way into a dirty shelf. But this is a plan which you're going to try to meet, but any zone change or anything like that would require our action, and if we object to it, we can. It doesn't bind the council to anything, or the government to anything. It's not a legislative act.
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, you are exactly correct.
And I also say there is precedence for this. You know, we passed the master plan, which had quite a few policy recommendations, and we haven't necessarily acted on all of those. And I don't think, you know, once each item as it comes to us should get a thorough and individual review. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing our job. I think this is a general overview of, you know, what the planning board and the work that went into this feel would be best practices, and you know, I don't have a problem endorsing this.
Any additional questions or comments for either the committee or the experts? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor.
I would like to make a motion that the City Council endorse the 2014 Easthampton Housing Production Plan as presented.
Second.
A motion, a second for the council endorsement of the Easthampton Housing Production Plan 2014. Additional comments, last comments or questions? Councilor Hagan?
I guess at this time, I just ask, again, because I'd like to go through these, because there's, you know, site of plan approvals versus special permits, and there's a lot of major changes in these schedules of actions. I just don't feel comfortable taking a vote tonight. If I can get one other counselor to support me in putting it over under our rules, but I know under the new guidelines, Councilor Rist, I would need at least one other counselor, correct?
All I can say to that comment is, yes, you are correct, you need another counselor, but my comment stands. It's not a binding document, and I know there's recommendations for changes to our, through the document you just mentioned, but they're recommendations. There's nothing bound, so I don't understand. I hear your concerns, but I think the committee's endorsed our subcommittee's endorsed the actions of, in a detailed plan of the Housing Partnership Committee and the Planning Board in giving us guidelines. What you might be stating is that you're going to recommend that they change some of these guidelines, and I think there's been enough debate on that. Personally, I can't endorse holding the vote. That's what I'm going to say.
No, I think what I would want the time for is, A, to kind of go through these and see if there's some way maybe the motion can be worded where there is a actual language put in the motion saying that while we endorse the plan, that the schedule of actions are subject to, you get what I'm saying, like actually in the motion. That's what
I would be careful, cautious on that. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
No,
I
it's
should have
fine.
went
And
through
again,
you. I would be cautious on that because the plan is being sent to the state with the hope of getting grants, and any plan that has some kind of hesitation in its motion language might cause concern at the state level. So, again, I would be opposed to changing the language of the motion for that reason. That's just me.
Again,
I'll stop.
if I get another counselor,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
it's not due till, well, we can't call up anymore, but if I read the document correctly, and I know the committee can help me with this, it's not absolutely something has to be turned in till December, correct? I mean, it's not like we're under a time constraint if it has to be done tonight. It's not till December that it has to be approved. I believe that's what the...
I believe that's the case too, but so why don't you...
Can we confirm that?
If,
You have to check with the motion from the
It would
floor.
affect whether I would move forward tonight or not.
November
If we
24.
were bound by a particular date.
I think one thing to consider is this is being recorded in the minutes, so the spirit of your dissent will be recorded.
It's November, it's not December.
I didn't,
I would request that the motion be withdrawn so that questions of the planner could be asked.
so who...
Second.
I'll
Okay,
remove
and
the second.
Okay, so I'm sorry, City Planner Allen, if you could just answer the question as far as the time sensitivity of that to the...
We are not on a fixed deadline. However, I will just note that the Housing Partnership's been working on this plan for about 15 months, and it was our hope that we could finish this process and move on with other business under the partnership. But there is no fixed deadline at this time in terms of submitting it to the state. It's a rolling
process. We can submit it at any time.
Mr. President.
May I ask
Counselor
if,
Hagan.
may I ask if my concern for the language of the motion, if it's not a pure endorsement and there's any hesitation underwritten in the motion, would that cause the state concern?
What the state has asked for as part of the approval process is a copy of your minutes, not a copy of the motion per se.
Oh, so they already have the hesitation.
Say they have the hesitation.
They have
It's
it.
a copy of the minutes. not-
That's what I was saying.
It's a copy of the minutes for both the planning board and the city council, which is submitted, in addition to the letter that would be signed by the mayor. And the letter is very specific on what it needs to state. So, any other questions?
Are there any questions while we still have the,
While we still have
yeah.
the planner here, if you could, this plan versus the 2006 plan, in 2 minutes, can you give us the synopsis of the highlights of what the changes are that you feel are important regarding anything like zoning, issues that would give greater flexibility?
A lot of the demographics changed in the plan. I would say that there were a lot of successes for projects that came out of the 2006 plan. Parcels that were identified in that plan were moved forward for housing, such as the 2 habitat projects, the one on Everett Street and East Street. In addition, the Valley project. All of those were RFPs that were put out by the Housing Partnership as a result of the work of the 2006 plan. So there were strategies that were done and sort of taken off the table, and we now have new data and new regional data. As we were working on this, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was also finalizing a regional housing plan, and now this plan has more of a sense of how we fit into the region and some of the regional housing needs that Easthampton could be moving forward on locally, such as providing greater access to units that are accessible, not necessarily just ADA compliant, but accessible units for mobility impaired, hearing impaired, any other disability. That is becoming a huge regional need, and that's now becoming a focus locally as well. Of the 2 units that are being built on East Street, one of those units is going to be an accessible unit. At least 8 of the units that are being built at 15 Cottage Street are accessible units on various different levels. So this is something that has been a key difference from the 2006 plan to the current plan, is the need for accessible units. And as you recall, that was one of my recommendations for the Parsons Street School, was that the council consider having some of those units to be accessible units, because there is a regional deficit for those that have disabilities for rental units with that need that type of housing. So,
There was a couple of times, I think, site plan review was mentioned. Was this something new from the previous plan?
I'd have to
Recommendations?
go back and recall. I don't know, Jackie, if you remember off the top of your hand.
I think there's a lot of similarity in the strategies between the 2 plans, actually. And those are things that you always want to be, they're things that aren't new in planning either. I think they're things that are ongoing. If that makes sense.
So it's essentially,
A lot of the strategies are similar, but the
same
data
plan.
has changed, and I'd say the biggest key difference is the accessible units, not only being a local need, but a regional need. So,
Okay, Counselor.
I think my question was kind of answered, but I was going to ask, I know it was probably in 2006, it was Stuart that brought this forward to us, and there were policy recommendations in the 2006 plan.
yes, there are.
And the council did endorse it in 2006. Okay, I just wanted to just put that out there.
Counselor Whitting.
And I'll add to that, and we didn't endorse all of the policies that were in the 06 plan. No, some of them were zoning changes and things like that.
Which we didn't enact,
Which we didn't act on.
but we did endorse the whole plan.
We endorsed the whole plan, but there were strategies and protocols and things just like in this plan that this city council never acted on. So, if that helps.
Okay, so I think, obviously, Counselor Hagan, if you are still in mindset, are you still asking for?
Oh, no, once the planner, I'll go back to I think the planner has to.
Oh, okay.
In other words, we're done with the planner.
Are there any more questions for the planner? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Now, vote.
Don't go anywhere, though.
Now hearing what the planner said, if I understood it correctly, and I think I did, is not only are we submitting the housing production plan, but part of the submission of the housing production plan also includes the minutes of the city council meeting. I believe that's what was said.
Yes, that was.
Given that, as long as in the minutes, as far as just this particular counselor is concerned, my feeling is I endorse the plan, but I reserve the right under the schedule of actions to take up each one individually and vote on its merits at the time it's brought before the council. So if that is in the minutes for Counselor Hagan, then I have no problem continuing tonight.
And I suspect all the councilors feel that way as well.
Correct.
Thank you very much. So I guess I will entertain a motion, unless Counselor Ziegler has something to say.
No,
Okay.
no, again, those are my sentiments too. I just had concerns with those last couple pages because there seems to be a timeline for certain actions too. And again,
Priorities.
exactly, high, low, medium priorities. And, we can certainly endorse the plan, but with reservations on those.
So I'd like to move that the City Council of Easthampton endorse the 2014 Easthampton Housing Production Plan as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, for the acceptance of the Easthampton Housing Production Plan 2014. Any additional discussion? I'm almost afraid to ask that. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Yay.
Okay, thank you. Now, property, Councilor Ziegler.
I have no report tonight, Mr. President.
Okay, Chief Mater, now you're on finally. The ad hoc committee. Oh, is it? Oh, it's
No, that's
Mr.
Mr.
Brough.
Brough.
I'd be the short straw.
Yeah, exactly.
How you doing tonight? I'm Patrick Brough, the chairperson for the Soccer Field Naming Ad Hoc Committee. Our committee met on 8/19/2014 to hear from the public in regards to the naming of soccer fields at Nonotuck Park. The public hearing opened and Reggie Redfern presented to us the case to have the varsity soccer field named after Coach Kuzninski. I'm going to refer to him as Coach K because I think I've even butchered that part right there. So, Coach K taught at Easthampton High School for 30 years and coached the varsity soccer team for 23 of them. Coach K had over 200 wins, which included wins. Coach K had over 200 wins, which included wins for Hampshire. Oh my God! Start over. He had over 200 wins, and in those wins included Hampshire League and Western Mass titles. He had 216 wins total with 51 ties, meaning 75% of the games that he coached, there was either a win or a tie. He had a great impact on the soccer program here at Easthampton. Mr. Redfern also mentioned Coach Howard Graham as another name for another field at Nonotuck Park, but we did not move further with that piece at this time. There were no further members of the public to submit any further names, and the meeting was then closed. The committee voted unanimously to move forward with the Parks and Rec Department and the City Council to name the field Coach K Field. So we're here to ask that you guys would do that. We also we did meet with Parks and Rec as well. They approved it unanimously as well. And John is here if there's any questions for him. And there are also a few members of the public that may have some things to say about Coach K if you'd like to hear them.
Sure, I mean, this isn't a public speak time, but again, as long as we don't have discussion about it. Yeah, if there's someone from the public who would like to come up and say a few words concerning this naming, that would be terrific.
My name's Tom Godin. I'm part of the committee. I played for Coach K for a few years, and I think an important part of this is not only the coaching aspect, but the teaching. He was a teacher at the school for 30 years, and a lot of people that were involved in a recent project to erect a scoreboard on that field also participated and donated, but they were all shared their sentiments with me and the committee that they were behind us on this Coach K naming of the field. He's a man with high character, and he's well regarded within the community from people that played with him and also had him as a teacher. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to make a statement? Okay, not be said. Any more?
I have
Mr.
a question.
Okay.
Are we going to put up some kind of a plaque?
We actually have the scoreboard. I don't know if anybody has, or if you've all had a chance to see the new scoreboard that was put up just a few weeks ago. There is a spot on the bottom of the scoreboard. On the top it says Easthampton Eagles, and there'll be one that is very similar to that that'll say Coach K underneath the scoreboard.
Thank you.
Any additional comments from Mr. Bruff? No. Okay.
Need a motion?
Councilor Derby, thank you.
Okay, so a motion. So I would like to move that the Easthampton Varsity Soccer Field from henceforth be called Coach K Field.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to rename the varsity soccer field as Coach K Field. Any additional comments? Councilor Winnie?
I have a question. Is this just the field, or is this the full complex?
Just the field.
Just the varsity.
Just the varsity.
The varsity field.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? Motion-
Abstain.
One abstention. One abstention. Motion still passes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Property at high, business, new business. Did we move, Councilor Derby, did we move that yet?
We haven't yet. If you'd like me to, I can.
Sure, that'd be terrific.
Okay. So under new business, we have an ordinance amendment, which is Chapter 9 taxi cabs, which is the insurance requirement. And just a little background on it. As we had our taxi application, we found kind of a anomaly within our zoning, which puts us at a much higher threshold for insurance that needs to be held by taxi companies than any other community in Western Mass. So this would be in an effort to try to fix that. So I'd like to move that be sent to ordinance subcommittee, and I would like to please set a public hearing for that specific issue for October 1st at 6:15.
Okay.
The motion is twofold.
Yes. So is there a second?
second.
Okay, motion second. So again, that's twofold. One is to move to subcommittee the amended ordinances, Chapter 9, vehicles for hire, Article 1, as well as setting a public hearing for that same topic for October 1st. Is there any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
We already did the appointments.
So that, I guess, concludes. So I believe it's supplemental appropriation, Councilor Hagan.
Okay, we have one supplemental appropriation. I'll do a first reading on it. It's a supplemental appropriation request from September 11th, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $23,797, and it's to be appropriated from the stabilization fund, and that amount and appropriated to the following. Fire full-time regular, $12,980.75. Fire incentive, $1,136.42. Fire overtime pay, $1,890. Fire overtime emergency, $85. Fire overtime training, $45. Fire sick leave incentive, $196.15. Fire personal days, $747. Ambulance overtime pay, $784.15. Ambulance EMS incentive, $2,135.53. Fire prior year retro, $3,406. And ambulance prior year retro, $391. Again, coming to the total figure of $23,797. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund the firefighters' local 1876 contract. And I would make in the form of a motion that be sent to Finance Committee for review.
Okay, a motion, a second, to move the supplemental appropriation of $23,797 to finance. Additional review. Any additional discussion, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
And I also would like to, at this time, set a public hearing on this matter for October 1st, and I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Okay, wait, a motion, a second for setting a public hearing for the supplemental appropriation of $23,797 for October 1st, 6:15 p.m. in these chambers. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. And I guess that concludes. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Just one other
sorry.
announcement. I just wanted to let the public know that the ordinance subcommittee will meet at a regular time Wednesday, 6 p.m., which is next Wednesday. Let me see. I think it's the 24th. So, and we're going to be discussing the taxi. insurance issue.
Thank you.
And I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?